All right, well, welcome to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome on to this Q&A. Now, a number of questions have come in. We'll see. I mean, should have dealt with them a while ago, but I can only deal with so many at one time. There was a question. I mean, we spoke about in general, about death and sin and all that, but there was a specific question. It comes into the same thing that we spoke about, reincarnation. So, it is a Jewish concept. There are people who don't want to believe in it, okay. People can believe whatever they want. We definitely believe, it's a valid concept. It's a Jewish concept. There's no question, even though it's not really mentioned in the Torah, it's really mentioned in Kabbalah, right? It doesn't really matter. But, part of the question is that we spoke last week, I think, or a few weeks back, maybe it's a follow-up, that according to Rabbi Yosef and others as well, that the Holocaust, right? We got really the Holocaust is the last thing here, but I don't know if we're going to get to it. But the idea of 6 billion people being killed, and that he said, it's because of reincarnated soul. They had to go through that, for whatever reason. I'm saying it was there were people from the time of the Second Temple that need to get fixed up, and that's how they got fixed up. But the question gets harped on is, well, if this person died, was he reincarnated? So the answer is no, not always. That's certainly not always the case, but you see where this question's going, because the first question was the story of Cain and Abel. Now, again, a very complex story. I mean, we don't get really that much information. The righteous Abel was murdered by his brother Cain, right? Right? He was killed. Now, Torah doesn't tell me why. Torah doesn't really tell me anything, about exactly what their discussion was. You're obviously gonna need oral law for that. If you don't hold by oral law, then really can't help. I mean, it's a simple explanation. There really is a simple explanation. But part of the question was Abel a reincarnated sinner? And the answer is no. Right? He was firstborn, right? Or secondborn, or whatever. Cain and Abel were born from Adam and Eve. So if they're born from Adam and Eve, there's no sin at this point. No one sinned, right? Obviously, we don't believe in original sin. There's no original sin here, right? They hadn't eaten from the tree of knowledge, right? Actually, he'd already eaten. He'd already eaten from the tree of knowledge. Okay. Regardless, Adam and Eve, right? So there was a question I did see, interesting question about Cain and Abel. Did they actually eat from the tree? Right, whatever. Interesting question of itself. They had the evil inclination within at that point because Adam and Eve had sinned. Right? Okay. Now, if Cain and Abel are the first children actually born, because Adam was created by God and Eve was created, through Adam somehow. Right? Exactly how that worked is a good question. Right? Not important for now. But the question is what, if they're the first people, right, then you're right. They're not reincarnated for sin, but not everybody is. Not everyone is at certainly at the beginning. But we're talking about later generations. We know that Abel was reincarnated. We'll see. Yeah, part of him came into Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That it's brought down according to Kabbalah. So I don't want to be misquoted here. I said today, I don't think there's any question. Everybody's a reincarnated soul, right? That's for sure. I don't think there's any question. Question is how many times the soul has come back. Right? Could come back 3 times. Someone explained to me, come back potentially 4 times. Okay. But when you're talking about the first person created, he didn't need to be a reincarnated soul, right? He had no need for it. Why? Because there's no sin at this point, except Adam and Eve ate from the tree. Okay, right? But this soul, the first soul that came out. So maybe the first 1,000 years, you had all these souls that came out. I mean, not every soul's been out. You have the Gemara says you got to wait for all the souls to come out before the Messiah can come. So obviously, all the souls haven't come out, right, before the Messiah comes. Okay, but even so, maybe say for 1,000 years, 1,500 years, anyone who was born, were they a reincarnated soul? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say so. Maybe some were. Maybe some, but I'm not going to say everybody. Because you need all these souls to come out at least once before they can go back and come back again, potentially. But anyway, if they're born first, they're not reincarnated, right? So my statement was, and I still hold by the statement, that the vast majority of people today, right, and people being born are probably reincarnated souls. Most likely the reincarnated soul. So you want to ask me, what about Adam? What do we ask by Adam? Was Adam a reincarnated soul? No. He's original, right? Eve was original. Cain and Abel are original. People came out later. They were original, right? But maybe they came back in later generations. That could be. That for sure could be. But, what's going on here, right? Let's just talk about Cain and Abel, right? Cain and Abel, very simple, right? And the book of Genesis, what happened? What happened? They both brought offerings. Both brought offerings, and Cain got angry. Cain got angry at Abel, and he killed him. Right? Essentially killed him. Now, Torah doesn't tell me what happened. Torah doesn't tell me what happened. Now, Cain, the word in Hebrew, Cain, means to acquire. Right? Kinyan really means to acquire. Right? So Eve named her first son Cain, right? Or translated in English as Cain. Okay. And it says, I've acquired a man with God, right? I.e. acquisition, right? The word kinyan in Hebrew means acquisition. So what did she mean? So she meant that when God created her and Adam, they were alone. But with this child, she and her husband were partners, right? Essentially partners. Right? And created him. God obviously had to put the soul in. Others say no. Others say it means the son acquired by God. Meaning, he's going to belong to God even after she died. Right? That he's still going to serve God. Right? Another little bit different way of looking at it. She has a second son. Right? So Cain's the oldest. She has a second son. What's the name of the second son? Abel. Right? Or in Hebrew, it's called Hevel. What does Hevel mean? Hevel literally means vapor, or Hevel means, Ecclesiastes says, right, as King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, right, everything is vanity, right, it can mean also vanity. So it can also mean over here, everything is ungodly, right, really nothingness, and all earthly and physical pleasure have no value, essentially have no value, right, really represents what we'll say nothingness or vapor. Yeah, now, what's not known, because the Torah doesn't tell me, you have to rely on the medrash here, right? Now, again, if you don't want to hold by oral law, then everything's a moot point here. We'll get the simple explanation shortly, right? Even without oral law. But the medrash says that Cain was born with a twin sister. Yeah, and Abel was born with two twin sisters. Now, when you talk about them having children, who they marry? Doesn't tell me the other women. Where are the other women? Yeah. So the Medrash says they were born with sisters. Cain had one sister. Abel had a twin sister. Now, how do they know? Where do they know it from? Because it's derived, if you look at the verse, it's derived from an unnecessary word. The word et, or es, depending how you want to pronounce it, means with. Yeah. It means with, but really it means it's going to be a direct object, right? Grammatically, it means anytime you say, God created the heaven and the earth. Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim, or es hashamayim, v'es haaretz. You don't translate. There's no translation, right? Usually, it means it's going to be a direct object afterwards, grammatically. But sometimes translated with, but I don't really have a translation. In either case, when you look at these verses, you have this word S in there. Now the S doesn't mean anything here, right? Seemingly, I don't need the word. To explain what happened, I don't need this word. It's extra, right? So the Torah doesn't, obviously, as we said before, the Torah doesn't say this explicitly. The rabbis have the right to biblical exegesis, and they say, we got an extra word here. So what's the extra word? So it must be, they learned in the Medrash that it's written once at Cain's birth and twice at Abel's birth, right? That is Genesis chapter 4, verse 2. Right? Genesis chapter 4, verse 2. You can look it up. So it's extra word. Right? It's extra word, one by Cain's birth, two by Abel. So they each marry the sister born with them. You tell me, wait a minute, forbidden relationship even for non-Jews. Certainly Cain and Abel weren't Jewish, right? That's pretty clear. So it's a forbidden union, right, in general. Nonetheless, why was it permissible here? In order that the world would be populated. So what do they argue about? They quarrel who's going to marry the other sister, right? No problem marrying more than one person, right? More than one woman. So what's the problem, right? Who's going to get the other sister? Each one had one. Very good, right? Save money on the wedding, right? You don't have to invite one side. You don't have to invite one side to the wedding. Very good. But they argued, who's going to marry the other sister? Claimed he was older. He's got the status of the elder son, the Bechor. So he argued he's older, so he gets the other sister. And Abel argued, no, she was born with him, right? In other words, she came with him, package deal. So she should go to him. And some say because of that, it's a factor that led Cain to kill Abel. Now, if you want to look at simple explanation, Adam told the sons they're going to offer sacrifices on the 14th of Nisan, and he suggested they do the same, right? What is the source for that? It's also commentary on the Medrash as well. Pick of the Rabbi as well. In either case, he told him to bring an offering. Cain was a farmer, so he brought flax. Right? Rashi says, others say he brought flax. He brought something inferior, second-rate produce, offered up to God. Abel was a shepherd, brought an offering in his own form of sheep. So what happens? The story goes, God accepted Abel's offering, sent the fire from heaven, showed, right, that he liked Abel's offering, but Cain's offering he ignored. Now, Abel, what did he give? He gave his finest sheep. Whereas Cain offered flax, or let's say inferior, produce. Now, let's understand, both understood they had to give sacrifice. Good question why Cain gave what he gave. He gave a bunch of dandelions. He thought that would be enough. Why give from, the best of what he had? For whatever reason. So he brought something inferior. Okay. Now, what did Cain see? He witnessed the fire takes care of Abel's sacrifice. Fire comes down from heaven. And seemingly he got ignored. Now, what did he understand? God wasn't so happy with what he did. So what did he do? He got angry. God reprimands him, as the Torah says, for his unjustified anger and his measly offering. And he warns him. And he says the evil inclination crouches by the door, waiting to be let in so a person can sin. God warns him. And he says, sin crouches by the door. What did God want? He wanted him to repent. Right? He wanted to have him overcome his evil inclination. Now, it's interesting. There is an opinion we mentioned before that what did he give? Right? He gave flaxseed. Now, flaxseed can't be a valuable item, right? According to this opinion. But the problem was, he didn't give the best. He didn't give the best. So, Abel seemed to have given the best, even though some say he could have brought cattle as an offering, more valuable than sheep. Yeah, but he didn't. Okay, but he also brought something of value. So what do they disagree on? Seemingly, they disagree on what God wanted, what he should have, what they should have given. According to Abel, didn't really matter what he gave, right? What animal per se that he gave, as long as he gave top quality. Whether it's an ox, whether it's a sheep, whatever, a goat, he gave the best quality. Yeah, so he didn't bring the best species of animal, but he brought the best of the sheep. Now, what did Cain understand? Cain felt, what's God gonna care? Like, if I give him something, I put it on an altar, like, well, what's the difference? Better quality, less quality, right? As long as it's from a good species, or from the best species. So he thought, okay, so I'll give from that. I'll give from flaxseed, and that was the best thing he had. That was the best thing he had. So both seem to be justified. Very good. Right? Both seem to be okay. But obviously God didn't think so. Right? Because God showed he liked Abel's better. That his line of thinking was correct. Yeah. Now, what should Cain have done? When Cain saw his sacrifice wasn't accepted, what should he have done? Should have brought a new one. Okay, made a mistake. Let him repent. They'll bring a new one. But what did he do? He got angry. And he blamed others. And who was the scapegoat? His brother. Right? So instead of being introspective and repenting, he hated his brother now because of what happened. So then they start to argue. Right? Again, just giving, basic information to understand what's going on here. First thing they argued on, who gets the other sister. Right? Cain said she belongs to me because I'm the oldest. Abel says she's born with me, she belongs to me. Now, at this point, Cain and Abel are the only sons that Adam and Eve have. Right? And now Adam separates from his wife. After the sin is form of repentance, eventually they get back together and have other children. But they thought going to eventually inherit and divide the world between them. And so what do they argue about? Another thing they argue about is who's going to inherit the spot where the temple will be built. Right? They understood in the future there's going to be a temple. Right? As the Medrash says, very good. So they understand that. But they're arguing who gets it. Who's going to get that spot? Cain and Abel divide the world between them, another explanation. Right? Another explanation. And Cain takes all the land. And Abel took all the movables. Took all the movable property. So what does Cain say to Abel? He goes, you're on my land. You're walking on my land. Right? You got no permission. So you got to figure out how to fly. It's my land. I own it. Abel says, what are you doing wearing my clothes? Right? Movables. So you owe me your clothes. That was the third thing. A fourth thing is that Cain argued that God doesn't reward good deeds or punish for evil, mistakes, and that there's no world to come. And Abel said, what are you talking about? God's going to judge everyone fairly. Right? He's put according to their actions. Also in the world to come, God is going to reward. Right? Reward and punish the wicked. They argued in that. As well. So there are a number of things. Right? Number of things they potentially argued about. Then the argument turned violent. Right? Abel's younger. He really was stronger. Really stronger than his brother. And he had him pinned to the ground. Cain starts to plead for mercy. And he's like, how could you kill me? Or how could you harm me? What are you going to say to God? What are you going to say to our father? I'm still your brother. So what did he do? Abel had mercy. And he released them. And then what happened? Cain pounced on him and killed him. He ended up beating him. There are different opinions exactly what happened. Right? He really didn't know how to kill him. So, he didn't know the place, I guess, of his vital organs or whatever. So he beat him over his entire body until he killed him. That's one potential reason. Another reason could be, remember those father sacrificed an animal by God by slitting its neck. So he did that to Abel, killed him that way. Or he bit him like a snake. Right? Just bit him like very hard and killed him like a snake. So whatever, there's that's potentially the reasons. Potentially reasons why. But I mean, whatever, there are deeper things. This isn't face value, right? I mean, whatever, brought down from the Medrash, very good. But what's the simple, without even getting into, getting into, other ideas, other, deeper ideas, even without any of those explanations. What's the simple explanation? What can I take out from the story? Right? It's very simple. Right? Very simple. That Cain sees that his sacrifice is not accepted. When he sees he's not accepted, he gets angry. Now, God tells him to repent. He shouldn't be angry, right? Seemingly encouraging him that sin should not creep at the door. Now, obviously, after he does it, he understands what he did wrong, right? That's something universal. Not allowed to kill somebody, maybe unless it's self-defense, but this is murder, right? That's forbidden even for non-Jews. But what essentially is going on is the fact he got angry. They had a quarrel. They had a disagreement for whatever reason, right? But where's the anger stem from? Forget about whether we want to marry the other sister, who the land belonged to, who the world belonged to, this and that. What's the simple explanation? Right? The simple explanation is he was jealous. And jealousy caused him to get angry. And then they had a discussion. He flew off the handle and killed him. That's the simple explanation. Right? So what do I learn out? What do I learn out? Jealousy is bad. Anger is bad. And certainly murder is bad. Right? Very clear. Now, the question is, if Abel gave the best of the flock, if Abel gave the best of the flock, what happened over here? In other words, God says to Cain, all his progeny, all his descendants are crying out from the ground because you killed him. All his potential children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, throughout the generations, not going to have them now. They're not going to have them now. Okay. But at the end of the day, now I'll ask the original question, right? Abel's righteous. God ate up his sacrifice. Very good. He ate up his sacrifice. Okay. Now, was Abel a reincarnated sinner? For whatever reason, regardless of what the story tells us, at face value, because we get no information, make no mistake, for whatever reason over here, Abel deserved to die. He was the one that technically caused Cain to get angry. Because, hey, it's not his fault. He brought a sacrifice. God ate up his sacrifice, right? The underlying question here, which is a fallacy, it's a major fallacy, that's why I'm pointing this out, is that everybody's innocent. Now, there are only a handful of people in the world that died only because of the sin of Adam and Eve. Only a handful. Ecclesiastes makes very clear. Nobody's been in this world except for a handful of people that are innocent. And a person has to die anyway because of the sin of Adam and Eve. But nobody's innocent. Now, a person could die younger. They could die older. They could die they could die being blown up. They could die in a car accident. They could suffer through cancer. I mean, a million ways a person can die. Different ways. A person can die in their sleep. Yeah. Person can get hit by a car. Person can, I don't know, whatever. Person can slip on ice, crack their head. There are a million different ways. Million different ways. But you got to remember, as we said before, that's only quote unquote, that's what we see. That's only quote unquote the cause. But that's not really the cause. What's the cause? What's the ultimate cause? God took the soul. That's the ultimate cause. Bottom line, that's the ultimate cause. Right? So everybody at some level sins. Right? Nobody's innocent. See, a big Christian fallacy. Nobody's innocent. Everybody sins at some level. Now, how's God going to mete out that punishment? Good question. Yeah? Could be a righteous person. A righteous person is going to maybe have tragic things happen because of the high level that they're on, the high spiritual level that they're on. So a minor infraction at their level is huge. Right? It's huge. Someone else, not on that level, God may overlook the infraction, or God may punish them anyway, but not as severe. Depends what a person does. But don't make any mistake and say, well, even this person, well, he's innocent. Nobody's innocent. Nobody's innocent over here. Well, undoubtedly people die in horrific ways. Yes. And children. Yeah, can be born with leukemia, can die young, and all kinds of tragedies. Yes. But they're not liable. They're not liable according to Torah. You got to be an adult, right? You got to be over the age of 12, for a girl, 13 for a boy, or up until the age of 20. So it cannot be punishment for them, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Because you're going to, or you're going to say God forbid, he doesn't know what he's doing. And it's just chaos. And it's their bad luck. You can say that. Kushner said that in his book. Bad things happen to good people, sold millions. And his son died of a tragic disease. It's horrific. But, he said God doesn't run the world. And he's not in charge. Right? He's not in charge, God forbid. So stuff happens out of my control. Well, that's not what the Torah says. Torah makes very clear the reward and punishment. Very, very clear. But as a child, you have to ask the question, a child didn't know anything wrong. They're not guilty. Right? They're not of age, as we mentioned many times. So if they're not of age, it's only one of a few conclusions. It's either going to tell me God's not in charge, stuff happens, possible conclusion, false conclusion. Yeah? Or you have to say that a person's made up of body and soul. And that there's reward and punishment. And that the soul may have to come back and go through certain things. But it can't be punishment for the child. Not punishment for the parents either. Right? We're talking about the soul here. Right? So if somebody dies, and we're all going to die, right? No offense, we're all going to die at some point. Yeah? And even if we would be totally righteous, even if God forbid, none of it, let's say God forbid, let's say a person never sinned. Never sinned. I mean, like I said, it's only a handful of people in the world, that never sinned. Okay. So then why they die? So there's a curse. After Adam and Eve from the tree, God says you're going to die. Right? He already promised them. He already said, if you eat from the tree, you're going to die. Right? You will surely die. Now, didn't mean necessarily immediately. It doesn't really matter. But death was brought to the world. Is that what God wanted? No. God had to go to plan B. But didn't God understand that could happen? Yes. So even if you have somebody that's truly righteous, that never sinned, let's say, ain't not going to happen in this generation for sure, but like, let's say you have someone, even a previous generation, yeah, and go way back, doesn't really matter. Why would they die? Why would they die? They're only going to die for one reason. They're going to die because there's a divine decree after Adam and Eve ate from the tree that there's going to be death to the world. That's why they're going to die. That's exactly why God sends them out of the garden. And he puts these fiery, short little fat kid cherubs in front of, with fiery swords, in front of the tree of life. We call the Eitz Chaim. Why? Why did God do that? Because what would happen if they ate from the tree of life? Fame! They're going to live forever. Can't live forever. How are you going to get fixed up or get your true reward in the next world if you don't die? Right? You have to go in the ground. That's what God says. Right? You're born from the dust, you're going to go to the dust. You're going to return to the dust. So that's what death does. And death is going to be, it's going to be a partial tikkun. It's going to help fix up the soul. Right? It doesn't talk, death is not going to get rid of all sin, for sure not. Right? So a person has to go through a spiritual perfection. Right? A cleansing process. Right? So that we understand, right, is suffering in the next world, and suffering in hell for however long, right? And that hopefully should fix up the soul. They should have a portion of the world to come. Right? But again, I want to make very, very clear, a person can die anyway, in many different ways. Many, many different ways. Now, if a person dies, they don't wake up. So you say that's tragic in some ways. No one can say goodbye, right? A person just didn't wake up, whatever it is. But the way we view it, someone gets killed, God forbid, I don't know, in a car accident, someone gets killed, or, someone dies, their body suffers, racked with pain, they have cancer. They have a million different things. But what happens when you see man's inhumanity to man? See, this is the problem. And this is the question. If you take somebody righteous, right? Rabbi Akiva, right? We've spoken about Rabbi Akiva before. Rabbi Akiva died. He had his flesh cut up, in front of everybody. Right? He died a horrific death. But, wasn't he one of the greatest rabbis of all time? Even though, he had 24,000 students that died, he still had 5 other students that passed down oral law than what we have today. Right? So it's very hard to understand. His students asked him the question as he's being killed. This is the Torah, this is the reward for Torah. Yeah. Now some people will die sanctifying God's name. Right? Dying because they are a Jew. Yeah. Meaning, Rabbi Akiva says, I was bothered by this verse. The Torah says, when we say the Shema, we say in the first paragraph, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. So let's go back to all your soul. So says Rabbi Akiva, I was always bothered by this verse. When am I going to give up my soul to sanctify myself to God? Yeah, meaning, there are times a Jew, does not apply to a non-Jew, but a Jew will have to give up their life for. Right? Sometimes for the big 3, anytime, any place, whether it's for immorality, murder, right, or idolatry. Right? So a Jew or non-Jew would say, put a gun to your head and say, I want you to kill this person. I want you to kill this person. If you don't, we'll kill you. You have to die. Or they say, I want you to bow down to this guy in a stick, right? A reference JC. Or show a little fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself, big mitzvah, make fun of idolatry. They say, hey, bow down to fatso or die. You got to be willing to die, right? Now, what happens if you don't? What happens if you refuse and you give in and you bow down? So you transgress the Torah prohibition. It's the Torah prohibition of sanctification of God's name. Now, a person reached the highest levels in the spiritual world because these are things you have to give up your life for. Now, not everyone agreed with Rabbi Akiva. There were different opinions. That's what the verse means. I have to wait. I have to sacrifice myself to God, and die. So they understood it. When it happens, I'll do it. Not that everyone's got that obligation, and find ways to be able to do that. Right? They disagreed. They said if it happens and they're put in that situation, that's what they'll do. That's what every Jew has to do. You rather die than kiss the cross. Right? That's forbidden. It's Torah prohibition. I think in this generation, I'm not so sure how many people would do it. Throw in the secular world, right? Maybe some would, But it's not a test, hopefully, that, we're going to have. I don't think we'd pass it. I don't think a lot of people would pass it. But in general, right? In general over here, you have to sanctify God's name. But the question is, am I waiting my whole life to do that? And I have to find ways to be able to do it? Or is the explanation, no, when it happens, if it would happen, that's my obligation. That's my obligation. Right? So he understood not that way. He understood that has been waiting his whole life for this. And there are people, throughout the ages. Jewish people sanctified their name, sanctified God's name. Right? And died horrific death. Right? So again, you can ask the question, you take someone very righteous. So why would that be? Yeah, it could be. A minor sin can get fixed up in such a way. But that leads to another question. Right? This leads to another question, which I want to get to. A middle question I'm not going to get to. 1 second. Oh, good. Got another troll here. Very good. Well, it's good to see the trolls are out. So another question was, why did God allow Abel to be murdered? Yeah, Second Temple in Jerusalem to be destroyed, right, by Titus, and permit the Nazi Holocaust. Yeah? Why? Good question. Valid question. Yeah. Now, when Titus comes and destroys the temple, Jeremiah has been screaming the entire book. God's going to destroy his temple. Yeah, they tried to kill him also. They didn't want to believe it. The temple was still standing. Right? So we're given some explanations. What happened? Right? Now, it's also very hard to understand. Because one explanation is because of sinas chinam, unlawful hatred, and by lashon hara, speaking badly against others, which is something that temple has still been destroyed. Still something we haven't got over. Right? It's something that, we should learn 2 laws a day, learning the laws of lashon hara, what not to say. We're not allowed to say. But why did the temple get destroyed? What's the answer? They don't need me to answer. Jeremiah says it's because of sin. Because you're not listening to what God says. Right? And it's going to be serious payback. There are all kinds of good things going on during that time. When the temple existed. You had idolatry, you had immorality, you had all kinds of things going on. Jeremiah's warning everybody. God's going to destroy his own home. Exactly how that works and when God's presence is going to go, good is another question. Another good question. Kabbalah 101 or 101a, how exactly that works. Okay, right? You look at Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. God's going to put himself in a box, right? God says, build me a sanctuary so I can dwell there. I'm going to put God in a box, even if it's 10 football fields long, even if it's humongous. I'm going to put him in a box. We're out to understand also. Yeah? So why did they get exiled? And why did the temple get destroyed? Because it was already destroyed. Essentially, it was still being destroyed at that point. Because the Jewish people weren't doing what they were supposed to. Even though during that time, the greatest amount of Torah being learned, okay. But still, there are other things going on. Nobody listened, or a lot of people didn't listen. So since a lot of people didn't listen, God got fed up and he's going to destroy my house. And I'm going to destroy it. But why? Why? If there's no such thing as sin, then why did he destroy his own house? Yeah, that's the question. That's the question. So now you want to tell me there was idolatry, there was immorality, right? There are people murdering other people, right? The big three you have to give up your life for anytime, any place. Who in the heck in the world is innocent? Right? There's no innocence here. God destroyed his own home. For what reason? For sin. That's the reason. We don't do what we're supposed to do. Read the end of the book of Deuteronomy, right? Read all the curses, right? Many of them apply what happened during the Second Temple period. One of them, a horrific thing, there was starvation, because you had these Biryonim, you had these thugs, these Jewish thugs. They wanted the Jews to fight against the Romans, right? Good luck. They wanted them to fight and be strong. So what they do, they burnt all the storehouses of food. Now, when you burn all the storehouses of food, you have no food. They don't have food for years stored up. They could have gone against the Romans in different ways, but they had food. They had food stored up. So what they do, they wanted the Jewish people to fight better, to fight stronger. So they burned all the storehouses. So what happens when you don't have food? People starve. So there's tremendous starvation. Unbelievable starvation. To the point where you had women eating their children. That's how bad it was. So you look at these curses, a lot of them, not all of them, have happened. Absolutely horrific. Now, what would cause such a thing? If God is all loving, right, and we look at him as a father in heaven, how can he do this to his children? How can he do this to his favorite nations? Christians will say, well, you're not favoring him, but look at all the times you sin. Isaiah says it, Jeremiah says it, right? All the prophets talk about it. Very good. It doesn't matter. We still have to serve him. That doesn't change the fact, right? That's all the big mistake. Doesn't change anything. The fact is, you're right. Jewish people sin. Okay. God chose us. We chose him. But he's never going to forsake the Jewish people entirely. Meaning, he's never going to wipe out the Jewish people entirely. It's always going to be a remnant. Right? Even by the end of days. How many Jews are going to be left? Good question. If you're holding by Torah mitzvahs at some level, hopefully we'll survive. And if you're not, you're in trouble. But okay. So that begs the question. Very good. Very good. Yeah? So Second Temple, who's innocent? Right? Now, this is something interesting, though. If the reason is because of unlawful hatred, and speaking badly against others, that's not one of the big three. It's not immorality, idolatry, or murder that you have to give up your life for. Right? Speaking Lashon Hara is bad. More than 30 prohibitions in one shot. But I mean, if someone put a gun to your head, Jew or non-Jew, and they would say, I want you to speak badly against this other person, this other Jew. Yeah, or I'm going to kill you. You can do it. They're not a problem. Why? It's not something you have to give up your life for. Yeah? But in comparison, when a person speaks badly against other people, all the other big three, idolatry, murder, and immorality, that you have to give up your life for, idolatry is greater. Sorry, speaking Lashon Hara is greater than those three combined. That's the way it's looked at. Now, if that's the case, let's say that's the reason. There are other things going on also, but let's say that's the reason. Doesn't everyone at some level sin speaking Lashon Hara? So it must have been really bad. I mean, today it's horrific. I mean, can't imagine what went on there, but I mean, now everything's social media and everything else is 10 times worse. What is, today? But still, if the prophets are saying the Jewish people are sinning, right? As Jeremiah says, he's going to destroy his own house. then why would he do that? If everybody's innocent, why would he do that? It's because it's reward and punishment. There can be severe punishments. And that's the same thing. That's the same thing. Why would he permit the Nazi Holocaust? Good question. No one can say for sure. Right? We're still too close to the Holocaust. But if I were to venture to guess, I can come up with a number of reasons. One reason, Germany itself, 80% into marriage. Nobody protested. Nobody said nothing. Potential reason. Second reason, maybe a more prominent reason, and that is the Jews, many Jews, are very happy living in Germany. We're saying that Berlin is our home. I.e., what's the reform movement going to do? They're going to take out of the prayer book going back to Zion. What is Zion? Jerusalem. I.e., we're going to get rid of that. We don't want to offend anybody. We're very happy here in Berlin. Now, think about it. God makes an eternal promise. The land of Israel belongs to the Jews. Very clear. Right? Very, very clear. All you have to do is read the Torah from the book of Genesis to the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Very, very clear. No one wants to ask me this. Yeah. How do you know the Jews should be in Israel? I said, did you ever read the Bible? Did you ever see the movie? It's very clear. It's an eternal promise. Yeah. Everybody knows it. Even the Muslims know it. Yeah. Even they know it. They're aware of that. So it's an eternal promise. Now, we've been out of the land for 2,000 years. Why have we been out of the land for 2,000 years? We've been exiled. Why we get exiled? Sin. That's why we got exiled. Very good. Now, if tens of thousands of people of God's chosen nation are going to say, we don't need the Western Wall. We don't need the temple. We don't need Jerusalem. We don't need anything. Right? Well, they didn't have a temple then. Right? The temple's already destroyed. But we don't need to go back to Israel because, we don't want to offend people. We don't want to say that it really belongs to us. So we'll say we'll be happy here in Germany. The Meshech Chochmah of Meir Simcha of Davinsk, blessed memories, commentary Meshech Chochmah, that's when it's commentary on Chumash, echoes the same thing before it happened. He called it before it happened. And he said, the same people are claiming this, in the place they're claiming it, the place where they're living is going to eat them up alive. Right? I'm paraphrasing. Right? That's what he essentially says. That the same people you think, it's your homeland, and you feel comfortable there and all that, they are going to burn you alive. They're going to, let's say, eat you up alive. He made that prediction well before it happened. So he said it's a big mistake. A huge mistake. Now again, is that the reason? We're not given a reason here. We're not given a reason here. But we're still too close. But at the end of the day, obviously, what happened there, and what happened in all the other times we got pogroms, and different things happen, and destruction of the temple. What's the reason? It's not because God just indiscriminately wants us to suffer. It's not what He wants. We're God's chosen nation. We're a kingdom of priests. So why do we have so much difficulty? Right? That's the essence of the question. Why do we have so much difficulty all the time? Why is there anti-Semitism? Why? To keep us in line. That's why we have it. There's no rhyme or reason. Because some things the anti-Semites say, they'll say, why do we hate the Jews? Because they're so rich and so powerful. Okay. What about in a place where they don't have money? They'll say the reason, we hate Jews because, they're bloodsuckers. They take, all the money from these programs, federal programs, or whatever. You can't have both ways. You can't say, well, you run the world and you're poor at the same time. Doesn't work. Right? In other words, a contradiction in terms. right? So there are many things they say that don't apply in other cases. So if that's true, then that's not the reason. That can never be the reason. So we see that Esav hates Yaakov, right? Brother, Esav hates Yaakov. If they look what Yaakov did, he stole the blessing and this, okay, not going there. But that's for all generations. That's for all generations. Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, of blessed memory, who was the spiritual leader of the Mir Yeshiva, brings down talking about this topic. He said one day I was walking, and two non-Jewish kids were playing ball, and the ball flies over one of the kids' heads. So he bent down to pick it up. He gave it to one of the kids. Didn't say how old the kid was, right? Whatever, probably 5, 6-year-old, whatever it was. And he gives the ball back to the kid. And the kid takes the ball and he smacks him. He smacks him across the face. He didn't say anything. He didn't gesture to him. He didn't stick his nose up. He didn't do anything. He bent down to pick up the ball. So ask Rabbi Yerucham over here, what happened? Why in the world this kid hit me in the face? And he said exactly that. Esav hates Yaakov. That's just the way it is. And it's going to be that way till the end of days. Sometimes it'll be better, sometimes not. Or someone make the claim and say, if we had more Noahites, it would disappear. It's not true. It would help. 100% it would help, but it's not going to end it. Because that will never end till the Messiah comes. So after the Messiah comes. It'll be bad. It'll be bad. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Right? But at the end of the day, we're the most picked on nation in the world. Yeah. No offense to the blacks, Asians, anywhere else. There's nothing even to talk about. Nothing even to talk about. I'm not saying they've had it easy. Right? But there's nothing to talk about. Now, that being said, you look at the Torah. Now, again, I can understand in a skewed way how people may see it. It'll say, well, look, you've been tossed around, you've been thrown out of your land, you've been gassed and burned and this and that. Obviously, God's not happy with you. True, right? Wouldn't disagree with that. Even though, there's the greatest amount of Torah learning being done today than even in the time of the Second Temple, but certainly not quality-wise. Okay, very true. But there's a cycle. The Torah makes clear. The prophets make clear. When you do the right thing as a Jewish people, you rise above the stars. When you do the wrong thing, you go all the way down to the dirt. There's nothing in between. Nothing in between. So we're our own worst enemy. So if something happens in general, then we have to look within. That's what we have to do. We have to look within. Right? So if everybody's innocent, why does God do this to his nation? Now you want to tell me we're not chosen anymore? We shouldn't be chosen anymore. Someone else came to be chosen for us. Very good. That's not what happened. You want to be close to the king? This is the answer. You want to be close to the king? There's payback. You want to be very close to the king? You would better darn well be careful what you do. What you do, what you say, it can affect you, it can affect your family, it can affect others. And the Jewish people get punished collectively. Yeah, we see that by the sin of the golden calf. God wants to wipe out the entire Jewish nation. Moshe says no. And God says, I'll start with you. I'll make a nation out of you. He says no. Right? And the only way he says and convinces God not to wipe out the nation is that he says, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your servants. Then God relents. Right? But they made a deal, though. God says, fine. If I go amongst the Jewish people, I'll kill everybody. So in that sense, I won't. But it'll be for all generations going to be payback for that sin. Like I say, it's not fair. It's collective punishment. Very good. But we see this all the time. Because we say, all the Jewish people are intertwined. So if a Jew does something wrong, secular or religious, it'd be worse if it's religious, makes a desecration of God's name. Right? But even a secular person's going to say, look at what Jews do. You wouldn't say that about about an Italian in Brooklyn. You wouldn't say that. Even if he did something egregious, not going to say, we're going to burn down Italy, no more cannolis. Never going to say that. No one would ever say that about them, about the Irish, about anybody except us. Why? Because we're looked at as a nation. We're looked at as a group. Because we're looked at as a group, then no matter what anybody does, it can have a negative effect on everybody. And it's very hard to change a person's perspective on that. Yeah. In other words, if we do the wrong thing, someone does the wrong thing, right? Let's say, someone does the wrong thing, everybody gets blamed. Everybody, I heard someone say about, certain COVID, things about wearing masks and distancing and, and this and that. And, there were many people that didn't do it. Yeah. Orthodox Jews. Okay. But all you need is one. All you need is one. You have plenty of secular people flaunting the laws also. That doesn't matter. Right? Nobody cares. The same thing, we get blamed. We're looked at it in a certain way, and collectively looks bad. Same thing what's going on in Israel. Right? We're not going to get into politics. Doesn't everyone agree? Everyone agrees. I mean, most people say Israel has the right to exist. Right? Maybe the Arabs don't agree with that, but okay. Yeah, that we have the right to exist and we have the right to defend ourselves. Very good. So what happened after October 7th? They got a grace period of like a week. I would have given them a few months, like a week. They didn't have a right to go in. They say, hey, it's genocide, which it's not. But even if innocent people, quote unquote, were being killed, yeah, didn't they use them as human shields? So to me, that was the most burning question. Why absolutely nobody in the world cares. Nobody cares to use them as human shields. And they kept bringing it up over and over again. No, and everyone is like, we don't care about that. You're killing too many people. The vast majority of people were killed with terrorists. There were other people killed, okay. But they used them. They used them as human shields. America went into Iraq, how many people they killed? Tons. Syria killed 600,000 people. Nobody said anything. No one batted an eyelash. He had 1 million, Hutus and Tutsis in the 90s or 2000s. 1 million people killed. No one said anything. Mass genocide. No one said anything. Why do we're the only ones that get condemned more than anyone else for anything? The UN. We don't really hold to the UN. Yeah. If so many rogue countries there, Israel's 1/1000 to probably less of the world's population, we've got condemned more than anyone else. Combined. It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I mean, you have to at least entertain the question. Like, why in the world? Anyone else would get a free pass over here. They're walking to Gaza, blow the whole place up for what they did. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. Yeah, you're trying to defend and do as best as you can, trying to get the people out and trying to get them to move, right? Because you're trying to get these terrorists and what they did. And mind-boggling. Yeah, we're held to a totally different standard than anybody else in the world, right? And it's not even close. Not even close, right? So there is collective punishment, but there's a lot of other things going on that make absolutely no sense. Why that should be. So again, to me, the whole thing after October 7th and human shield, like, it's a mind-boggling idea that nobody, a lot of people, I'm not gonna say nobody, a lot of people don't care. That doesn't matter. And what they're trying to do. They're trying to be as careful as possible. And you had American generals admitting this is probably the most, most civil, humane way to do things, more than anyone else. Yeah, they admitted it. Okay, the vast majority say, so what? So what? I mean, they also make statements that don't make any sense either. They're going to tell you, mass genocide, we're not doing a good job, right? Because, since 1948, the Arabs have like exploded in numbers, and how many people, they have, so, if it's mass genocide, we're doing an awful job. Yeah, let me take some questions here. Didn't someone say we shouldn't have brought sacrifice in the temple? No, that wasn't the second temple for sure. That's not the reason. That's not the reason why it was destroyed. Second temple was because of Lashon Hara, Sinas Chinam, right? Unlawful hatred. But nobody knew the answer. The Gemara says, whether you hold the Gemara or not, right? The Gemara says no one had an answer. No one had an answer exactly why until God Himself gave the answer. That they say God said, and that's what they heard. That was the answer. Yeah, it wasn't for anything else. Someone says dispensational Christians believe we should bless Israel. Not they say it's a new covenant, but it is not a location but a people. I'll ask a fundamental question. I'll ask a very simple question. The Torah says very clear we should be in the land of Israel. Yeah. Is it as Herzl Schmerzel would say, we want a land of Jews. No matter where. We'll be happy if we get Israel. Right? But he wrote in the Zionist state, which I wouldn't read, right? Unless you want to read in the bathroom. It's where it belongs. But he would have been happy with Argentina or Uganda. Right? But the land of Israel is holy to the Jewish people. No, the Torah makes very clear. Now that being said, why is it holy to the Jewish people? Because you say it's God's presence was there, etc. We don't see, God direct like the time of the temple. Okay, but what makes it holy? What makes the land holy? What makes the land holy? Yeah, you had the temple, very good. But what did you have with the temple also? You had Torah, you had mitzvahs. That's what makes the land holy. If it's only a place, if it's only like, rocks and buildings and, other things, what makes it holy? That doesn't necessarily make it holy. It makes it holy, again, mostly because of God's presence here, but through Torah mitzvahs and keeping Torah mitzvahs. So, right, that's, there was a discussion in the early 1900s. There was a whole discussion about who's a Jew. What makes somebody a Jew? Right? Somebody says they're a nation. Someone says they're, a people. Someone says they're this. Someone says that. And an old Polish Jew comes in, right? He's hearing this discussion. And he bangs his hand on the table. Yeah? And so again, they're trying to find what is a Jew. So he bangs his hand on the table and he said in Yiddish, a Yid's a Yid. Right? A Jew is a Jew. Right? Not about language, not about the land per se, right? A Jew is a Jew. And what is a Jew? He's got to keep Torah mitzvahs. And where's the best place to keep it? In the land of Israel. But if you're in the land of Israel, you're not keeping Torah mitzvahs, or there shouldn't be Torah mitzvahs, then what's the point of the land? You tell me, it's where our forefathers walked, this and that, very good. A lot of history here, according to the Bible, no question about it. Tremendous amount of history. But what makes it what it is? It only makes it what it is when you sanctify the land. What does it mean to sanctify the land? Take Truma Maisa from fruits and vegetables. Torah, sabbatical year, keeping mitzvahs. Having the land just rocks and sand and this and that, it's nothing. It's nothing if you don't have Torah mitzvahs with it. Right? Now they say, all right, forget about a new covenant, very good. Yeah, it's not a location but a people. Yeah, what does it mean that there are people? It means you have to have the heart and the soul. The heart and the soul means you're keeping Torah mitzvahs, not just about the land. Yeah? Because the land doesn't really mean much. You want to bring back Hebrew, very good. You want to eat falafel, very good. What does that have to do with Torah? What does that have to do with mitzvahs? Nothing. You want to sanctify the land. Yeah? So, we are a people that are chosen by God, and we chose him, and we're supposed to keep what he says, right? So what happens when you don't keep what he says? There's payback. 100% there's payback, right? There's no question. So it's not just about, location's important, that's true, right? You have temple here, you have God's presence here, very good. I mean, still see God's presence, not directly. I mean, not in the sense that they did in the time of the temple, the first temple for sure. I mean, we see miracles all the time. I mean, just as last war, but it's only through Torah mitzvahs. That's what it is. Someone that says, yeah, sent the son, okay. Um, um, Someone asked, what is more right? An eye for an eye and justice against God's chosen, or endless forgiveness? Or endless forgiveness. First of all, an eye for an eye, we don't take it literally. We learn out that, that an eye for an eye means damages, right? That you have to pay damages. You damage someone, then you got, either you got to pay for the value of what you damaged, you might have to pay for medical bills, you might have to pay for other things. So we're not taking it necessarily literally, right? I mean, but there is payback, 100%. There will be, there will be payback, and anyone who starts up with the Jewish people, God is going to take care of them. That we have no doubt. We have no doubt God is definitely going to take care of them, right? So what? So you want to say what's more right, or endless forgiveness? I mean, endless forgiveness is not right. There's no endless forgiveness. God has a lot of mercy. It's not endless. Because at some point, God's going to say, okay, I had enough. I'm going to punish you. Or I'm going to punish them. Or I'm going to punish someone else. Right? Why are there quote unquote natural disasters? We don't believe in natural disasters. God's causing this to happen. Why? Because he's sick of the sin in that city. Or in that state. Yeah? Or in that place. For whatever reason. Whatever's going on in that place. Yeah, you think it's a coincidence? A major earthquake, the epicenter of a major earthquake is in San Francisco? Not a coincidence. Or something happened in New Orleans? I mean, it's not bastions of morality. Yeah? So at what point does God decide he's going to take over and do something? Good question. Yeah, God hasn't spoken to me recently, but, it's because of sin, right? Each nation, each place, they get judged. There's a scale. There's a scale when it goes on the side of sin, and God says, okay, I've had enough. Whenever that is, he's going to make something happen. Whether it's a brush fire, whether it's a tsunami, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's I don't know, a tornado, hurricane, whatever it is. Not just natural things, right? Who controls nature? Say nobody. God controls nature. If God controls nature, he's making it happen. So why would God do this? Because he's sick of what's going on in these places. And he wants to wake people up. That's why he does it. Right? It's a wake-up call. Okay, good. God has left Israel alone. Yeah, we're still here though, aren't we? We haven't disappeared, have we? Right? We're still here. Yeah? Even when we don't do things right. Yeah? And then many times we haven't done things right. Okay. Very good. Even we haven't done things right. Have we disappeared? No. We're still here. Miraculously. Miraculously, we're still here. But the answer is, the closer you are to the king, you got to be a lot more careful. Very good. Very good. That's what you got to do. We got to be better. Yeah. Isn't that what Ecclesiastes says? Jewish people stand alone, right? But we're not alone though, because we got God's help. Yeah, look at look what's going on the last year. Yeah, look what's going on the last year here in Israel. Yeah, all these missiles, hundreds, thousands of missiles. Yeah, you got less than 5% did serious damage. There are people been killed, true. Direct hits, okay. The vast majority hit nothing. Nothing. What does that tell you? We're lucky. Patriot missiles. It's nature. Ain't nature. Definitely not nature. You got to be a fool to say that. Look at the odds. What are the odds? 6, 7, 8,000, 10,000 missiles. And most of them hit empty areas. That's either stupidest people shooting them, could be, or there's something else going on. Because according to nature, it shouldn't be. According to, you see in the last few days, direct hits, people killed. It's very sad, no question. But the vast majority, not done any damage. None. That's miraculous. No question. Okay. So God's putting the fear of God in us. Yeah. We should change. We got to be better. I don't think there's any question. There's no question we have to be better. But when you see something like that, it's a wake-up call. Sure. Because in the last 2 years, a handful of missiles have hit houses, people. Handful. Come on, what are the odds of that? Let's say there were 20, 30 that hit things in the last 2 years. Out of 10,000? That's like less than 1%. That's unheard of. That's less than 1%. That's not even a quarter of a percent. A quarter of a percent of all those missiles? Even if you tell me it's 5%, let's say 5% of caused damage, the people, and kill people. Let's say 5%. That's 5% of 10,000. It's 200. And not a lot. Compared to 10,000? I mean, come on. Yeah, we got lucky. Oh, we got the Patriots. Oh. No. Something else going on. Torah protects. If we'd be doing what we're supposed to do, none of these things would hit. None. That's what someone said to Brisker up. Look at all the miracles, during the 6-Day War. Only a few thousand people, were killed. They expected 50,000. They were preparing 50,000 body bags. So the Brisker Rav said, no, it's not impressive. 2,000 people shouldn't have died. The fact that anybody died is our fault. We didn't protect them enough. Okay. But think about it. I mean, you look at what happened and, and how they turned things around, seemingly overnight was, pretty miraculous in a lot of ways. Yeah. But, you have divine protection, but why do you have divine protection here? Because again, the land of Israel is holy, very good, but what makes it holy? This is the point. What makes the land holy is the people in the land learning Torah. That's what makes it holy. Problem is, you got a lot of people in this land not learning Torah and doing worse things. Yeah. Doing tremendously worse things. Now, because of that, that's bad. So that lessens the divine protection. But not only that, but when you have people say, that's power of my hand doing this, that's also bad. It's also bad. Because they're saying God's not doing anything. It's the power of my hands. That Torah says explicitly, very bad. Yeah. So, government officials say such a thing. Look at our power, look at our might, look at this, look at that. That's the worst thing they can say. In God's eyes. And God says, okay, you think the power of your hands? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. Bunch of missiles, direct hit. Destroyed apartment buildings. Destroyed. Number of people killed, destroyed. God's not just going to make a point. Oh, you think it's the power of your hand? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you one thing. All I have to do is show you one thing. You miss this, you miss that. What happened on October 7th? Right? All these books are going to come out soon. Where the failure was. Where's the mighty army? You got a bunch of ragtag people that, they were able to do what they did. No one thought they were great in the wildest imagination. That was one thing. Their hubris, their gaiva, their being conceited got knocked out of them. Mighty army, look what happened. Look what happened. Yeah, heads will roll. They're gonna roll. Yeah. Once, finish mopping up, who knows when. Yeah, it'll come out, I'm sure. But that made them look very bad, bottom line. How'd they miss it? That's what everyone asks. How did they miss such a thing? How did they not think it was, greatest intelligence in the world, quote unquote? Well, God hit them right in the heart, literally. Literally. I don't think they question. But knocked them out right between the eyes. Oh, you're so great? Yeah, watch this. Yeah, some of the people that they captured, these terrorists, they think like in the wildest dreams. They didn't think they're going to be able to do what they did. It took a long time for them, to respond also and whatever, but they in the wildest dreams they didn't expect that. God hit them right in the heart. Right in the heart. And said, you think you're God's gift to the world? You think you're so mighty? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. Terrific. But he showed us. Yeah, no question. Yeah, any other questions? Seems like just follow most of the commands, if not all of them, even as non-Jews. No, there's a limit what non-Jews can do. Yeah, things that make sense logically according to Torah. Right? There are things I would say it's a moral imperative or good to do. Very good. Right? That's certainly not obligation. What about take vengeance if he commands his wife not to do so? We're not talking about. God is vengeful God, right? And he will take vengeance, right? He will take vengeance against these people. But guess what? Even if he's got to take vengeance, he had to let it happen. Why do you have to let it happen? Because he made a decree. And and people need to die. And people need to suffer because they didn't listen. And they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So there is payback. It's payback for us. Doesn't mean we don't have the right to defend ourselves and all that. But again, this is the bottom line. In that we've done things to deserve it. Even a Jew, even an Orthodox Jew who says, wow, look at all these miracles and this and that, but they don't change one iota from it. That's also bad. I would say it's worse to say it's the power of my hand. That's one of the worst things you can say. That means you're taking, it's power of my hand. Yeah. You can't even control when you go to the bathroom. You're going to say I have the power of my hand? You have no power unless God gives you power. Yeah. God's the one in control. But if we don't do what we're supposed to do, the Torah makes very clear. It's, again, as I was telling someone, yesterday, if it would be so simple just to believe someone atone for my sin, which, for any of my sins, which the Torah says certainly not that way. But if that would be true, I'd be right. I'd sign up straight away. Sign up straight away. Be the easiest thing. Pass the buck. I don't take any responsibility for my actions. None. I'd be the first one to sign up. Right? I go to the Pope himself, sign up. Take on Christianity right in front of him. Right? I gotta do it right. Gotta go the whole way. Yeah, come on, throw me in the river. Dunk me, let's go. I'm ready. It's all shikker. It's all lies. It's all mistranslations. So put something on, one of my posts. Total mistranslation. Absolute mistranslation. Yeah. Obviously from Isaiah 53. Blatant mistranslation. Okay. How can you ever, I understand why it is. But it would be so easy, then my actions don't matter. What I think doesn't matter. What I do doesn't matter. All these things don't matter. The easiest thing. The easiest thing. Yeah. But again, God's gonna take care of that. Now, I'll tell you one of the biggest miracles in the book of Esther. One of the biggest, I said this over on Purim, that Esther, it's basically my family. They're most of my married kids there, and I bet almost all my married kids there. So I asked, what's the biggest miracle? They said, you're still talking. I said, no. The more I drink, the more I talk. Okay, what's the biggest miracle? Biggest miracle of the Megillah, in my opinion. One of the biggest miracles was the fact that Achashverosh gave Mordechai his ring and let him write a decree, in edict or whatever, that the Jews have the right to defend themselves. Yeah, they have the right to bear arms. So anyone attacks them, they can kill them. They killed more than 500 people. Yeah, that was a huge miracle. Imagine, a nation gives it, Jews that, they're going to be attacked, they give them the right to defend themselves. Huge miracle. Huge miracle. So, we're right to defend ourselves. I don't think there's any question. Yeah, so the person being attacked, they can certainly fight back. Right? It's not a question. But you got to remember, God's the one in charge. He's going to nail all these enemies. And look what he's done the last year. Right? Hezbollah knocked out, mostly. Yeah, Syria in disarray. And you got Hamas that's very much weakened now, even though trying to rebuild. Huge. And now just knocked out Iran. Also, you knock them out, then they got no weapons. No one's got any weapons. Not saying they're totally knocked out, but they're a heck of a job right now. I don't know, people saying they really didn't, they hid things, I don't know, whatever. Right? Yeah, we'll see in the future. Yeah, we'll see what the future brings. But it's a huge thing. You just knocked out, like, on 3 fronts, most of your enemies. I mean, tremendously weakened. What they did with, these pages with Hezbollah is unbelievable. Unbelievable thing. Yeah. Knocked out all these leaders, killed all these scientists. And they're in big trouble now. What are they going to recruit now? Who wants to go to, have to rebuild? Let's say they destroyed most of the nuclear capability or a lot of it. Yeah. Who's going to come back now? How many scientists come back? They just, right before the ceasefire, they knocked out another scientist. It depends how much, I guess it depends how much they get paid. If they get paid enough, maybe something be crazy enough to want to go there. Being an underground bunker, who knows what. But the days will be numbered also. They're unbelievable. Just knocking out all these people and all their leaders. All these army leaders. Knock them out. Tremendously weakened now. The rebuild of this. Okay, for now. For now, it's a huge thing. Huge thing. So, you got to look at that and say, wow. Look what God did over here. 3,000 pagers in Hezbollah. I mean, that's uncanny. People make jokes, so like you're talking to each other like on with styrofoam cups. No one wanted to use a cell phone, or like you saw these things. The person's using a toaster, and they're like, "What's going to happen when the toast comes out?" What's going to happen is like, all right, the toast is ready. Like, boom. Like they have no idea. I mean, it's genius. But who's behind it all? It's not just technology, whatever. It's God behind it all. There aren't all these people out now. Hopefully it should be a lot easier going forward. I mean, okay, there'll be other tests. I'm sure. Sure the Houthis aren't dead yet, but okay, they send one missile every, once in a blue moon, you knock it out. Whatever. It takes a while to get here. Fine. Whatever it is. Yeah. What would they've done? I mean, it's uncanny. God's behind the whole thing. Someone asked, how do you withstand the test of extreme wealth? If you get it, call me. We'll talk. You have to remember where it comes from. You have to remember, if you have wealth and God gave it to you, your obligation is to build Torah and to help Torah, to help needy brides, to help rabbinic scholars, to help yeshivas, girls' schools. That's your job. You give 20%. Shouldn't give more than that. Right? Then you might need other people to help you. But that you have to realize it's not yours. Meaning that it's given, if a person has extreme wealth, it's given to you because God wants to use you as a vehicle to help others. Right? Reichman in Toronto, he made, billions, different businesses he had. Tons of it went to Torah institutions. All over, across the board, up to everybody. That's what you have to do. That's exactly what you have to do. So if you get extreme wealth, call me. I'll tell you how to handle it. It's not just give and be charitable. It's more than that. Right? Now you get a great responsibility. Now you got to be careful because everyone and their mother's going to come knocking on your door, looking for help. But I would say, first place is to help. Certainly, yeshivas and girls' schools, no question. Right? Or, people sitting and learning here. Government just made definite cutbacks. They're great rabbis in America now just trying to, they're raising more than $100 million. Right? And, because of all these cutbacks. And people, seriously learning Torah. That's where money should go. As well. Because then you're going to bring, you're going to help the next generation. I mean, I had my money, it's what I did. Set up a learning institution and had 20 people at one time, 22, one time between 22 and 30. I mean, whatever, strongest, one of the strongest Torah places, still got taken away. But, learned my lesson in a lot of ways. So, wealth comes back. I know what to do. Now I know what to do better. But that's what it has to be used for. Well, then you can, use it for yourself also, but 20% for sure, that's where it's going. That's where it should be going. For sure, you help needy brides. I would say even setting up free loan society, also a good thing. Right? People in a pinch, marrying off kids, that they can get loans, with good terms. Obviously interest free, also a big thing. I would also say, if I had a serious chunk of money, let's set it aside to help people move to communities, non-Jews, right? Also, non-Jews who, not doing so well financially, but they're serious about conversion. Obviously, there have to be a vetting process or whatever, but, that would be on my list also. I mean, obviously going to help Jews first, but, I think it's important to help non-Jews also. Obviously if they're serious, right? But that's where the money would go. Yeah, you can do that. Nonprofit. The problem, I'll tell you what the problem is. I know someone else want to do something like this, and the problem is to get people to donate to it. It's going to be very hard to get Jews to donate for it unless they really believe in the cause of the Bali Tshuva or the converts themselves. Because they're going to say, "Why should I help non-Jews? Even if they're serious, why why should I help them? Help Jews first. Makes sense. But non-Jews need to be helped also. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of stories. Plenty of stories. Plenty of stories. People disabled, people, may have difficulty or not making enough money. Moving to Jewish communities is expensive. Yeah. The closer you get to a synagogue, price goes up exponentially. There's a definite need. 100% is definite need. So that's on my list. It's on my list of things to do as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Let me see. Any other questions? It only takes one, by the way. It only takes one person who's got serious clout that do things in a big way. But even even if you get from a lot of people, you get 1,000 people to give you $10. It's also a lot. You know, you know, I know someone's got a outreach organization. That's how he's been doing it for years. I mean, he's got bigger donors, less donors, but he goes all around and he's getting he's probably getting more now from people, but over the years, you get $18, $36, $50, but you get from 10,000 people, that's significant money, right? You think on a big scale, less amounts. Yes, they better get 10 people to give you $5,000. Okay, go find 10 people to give you $5,000. I'll give you 50,000. Great. Hard enough getting $1,000 out of people now. Now because the war in Iran, people are more afraid now. As well, but also some people say, "Oh, I got to save it. What I can give it for this, that." It depends on the person. Somebody asked, "Aren't non-Jews required to follow the Torah if they're in the land of Israel?" No. Why are they obligated? They're only obligated to follow the laws that apply to them. Are they going to be obligated, to buy, let's say, fruits and vegetables? I mean, it's hard to find a place that doesn't have, that doesn't tithe fruits properly. But let's say, do they have to eat fruits and vegetables that are tithed? No. Doesn't apply to non-Jews. Right? Only the things that are going to apply to non-Jews. Yeah, there's no Ger Toshav today, anyway. Right? There's no stranger living in the land today that would apply that certain things they would have to keep. Yeah. It doesn't apply today because we don't have technically speaking, it's dependent on the Jubilee year. And since we don't have a Jubilee year, we have a sabbatical year, it doesn't apply. So since it doesn't apply, there is no Ger Toshav, no matter what anyone tells you. There is no Ger Toshav today, then they don't have to keep mitzvahs here. They have to only keep what applies to them, and that's it. They don't have to keep what we do, for sure not. Who's further from God, Christians or Muslims? Christians. Muslims believe in one God. Might be crazy, but they believe in one God. Someone asked the question, what's better, a Christian or an atheist? So I heard someone say a Christian's better because at least they believe in God. Could be. Yeah, I hear that. But a Muslim believes in one God. There are opinions it's idolatry. Right? I will say there are opinions that Islam is idolatry. We don't practically speaking, we don't hold that way. We don't hold that way. I mean, they're both bad. They're both bad, but I would say that I think probably Muslims better because they believe in one God. It's not idolatry. At some point, the Muslims should say that God isn't on their side. Could be. Could be. They won't say it till they're dead. Then they'll say it. Yeah. I mean, not all Muslims are radicalized. Not all of them. I mean, I would say a lot of them are, but not, certainly not all of them. But I would say at the same time, They're going to see the truth eventually, right? One way or another. They're going to see it. But even what they hold, they don't. They'll take gays and rape them and kill them and butcher them and like they're it doesn't totally not moral either. So like you pick your poison. I would say it's probably better. I would say it's probably better than um than Christians. Oh, someone blessed me with lots of money. I could use it. Yeah. So very good. Could take that to heart. See what happens next coming days. See where it comes in. See if the blessing comes true. Yeah. Let me see other questions. A great rabbi once told me that he said, "Don't worry. In 10 lifetimes, I may never have money. So, but by people like you, it'll come back eventually. He just, he didn't tell me when, right? He didn't exactly tell me when. So, meant to be, it's meant to be. It's not meant to be. Like I told my Rebbe when I first came back and I was learning up a storm. So I told him, listen, I told him I'm poor. If I can't have the blessing, of money, I said, give me the blessing of Torah. I said, you give me the blessing of Torah. So I'm very close to my goal, finishing the entire Talmud. We're going to get there probably in the next, I don't know, month, maybe, month and a half. That's going to be a big thing. That's going to be a huge thing. Told Rebbe's grandson learns in, same place where I learned. I was like, you can tell the Zaidi, you can tell, you can tell your grandfather that, wherever I want him to come, he's coming for this. I don't care where it is. I'm making his house if I have to. But I said, this is going to be such a huge thing, 22-year odyssey of doing this, whatever, and learning. They say once you learn it once, then, you can start to really learn it, properly. But okay, so that's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. So whatever, you should be well. So want to finish, definitely want to finish soon. But I told him, I said, wherever I want to go, he's going to come. I said, you're going to get him to come. He's like, yeah, what a big thing. I said, you're going to get him to come. Yeah, it's Christianity, so it's Islam. No, no connection. No connection whatsoever. The only question was, what's better? It's like saying, what's better, this dead animal or that dead animal, right? They're both dead, right? Um, um, Someone who says it's a joke, but Jews atheist family teaches the children there's only one God, you don't believe it. We don't believe in him more. Or you say, a person on a desert island, he's got 3 synagogues. He says, why do you have 3 synagogues? You're only the person here. Says, yeah, these other 2 I wouldn't pray in. Politics, even in one person on his own island. What's the best way to stay low key when you're around non-Jews? I don't know if there is a way. Stay away from politics. Stay away from mentioning anything about Judaism. It's kind of hard though, if God wants you to be found out, you'll be found out. Either way, even if you don't necessarily look the part. If you do look the part, then I would just say keep to yourself. And people are talking about certain things, you don't have to jump in. People feel that they have to defend God and say things. I don't know. I don't know about that. But I would say, that you want keeping a low profile just means like, you don't talk to so many people or, you don't talk about like, Israel, Judaism, God, try and keep those conversations to a minimum, and it depends. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. Sometimes people may push your buttons, and some people may say that, just better not say anything, right? About anything. Yeah. But, something will come out. Someone, let's say someone said something about, something says about Israel and it's below the belt. You want to say something, or, you got a coworker, if it's a woman, a guy wants to talk, you say, sorry, I can't. I'm in the process of conversion. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, you can't give me like a small hug. You can't this. It'll come out. I mean, it's very rare if it didn't, but yeah, I would say try and avoid it as much as possible, but I don't know if it's actually going to be possible, in many ways. All right. Someone asked why Muslims better than Christians because they believe in one God. Yeah, it's not idolatry. Paganism. A lot of Christianity is paganism, right? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Islam either. I mean, it's a very violent religion. Tremendously violent, religion. I mean, they're both false. They're both false books. I don't think there's any question. And, they're both false. But living under either one is bad, if you're a Jew. But, I would say the only benefit, to Islam is they believe in one God. Probably the only benefit. They are closer to Noahides, that's true, than certainly Christians. But, I think that's a major thing that distinguishes them. But, they're both bad and they're both wrong. So, pick your poison. Muhammad also taught Jews and Christians. So what? What do I care? What do I care what he taught or not? It's false prophet. Yeah. Whatever he said, we don't believe it's true. So what do I care who he taught? Yeah. And what did he teach them? Yeah. What exactly did he teach them? Taught them good ethics, good values? I mean, supposedly if he wrote it, book's a pretty bad book. It's pretty inaccurate and pretty violent. So like, what do I care what did he teach them? What exactly did he teach them? Where does the term Judo-Christian come from if it's so different theologically? That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not even sure myself where exactly it comes from. It's referring to Jewish converts to Christianity. I don't know if it's exactly that. It's Jewish Christian values. It came around the 19th century. Sharing cultural and religious heritage between both. The problem is that even if it's true, you're talking about Jews that converted to Christianity or whatever. Even if you're gonna say that, and they have some values, some values that they what do you call it? They blend together. Okay, but you're right. It's an oxymoron. Doesn't make any sense because they're both diametrically opposed. Totally diametrically opposed. But if it's talking about, Jews that converted to Christianity, or there's an overlap there between Jewish values and Christian values, and they put them together, it could be that's what it is. Yeah. Any other questions? Let me see. Um, yeah, not much depth. Yeah, that's the easiest way. That's the easiest way. Deal with other people, just keep it superficial. How's the weather? This, that. You know, there are some people that's my whole conversation with them. How they doing? What's the weather? That's it. What's going on? What's going on with my kids? Keep it very simple. Someone asks what's more important, tzedakah or meiser. Meiser you have to give. Meiser's 10%. You have to give. It's not the same. It's not the same. Meiser is 10% of what you make after taxes, right? Tzedakah is anything over that. Is anything over that? It's not the same. Meiser you have an obligation. Torah obligation to give. Yeah. Some say it's 10%. Some say you can give up to as much as 20%. Yeah. Tzedakah is something else. Tzedakah is like, if you can give or whatever. This is an obligation. This is 100% an obligation. Yeah, anything else? I think that's gonna be it. 1 second. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time. 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Mike Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos and Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus. If you want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, CHAIM.